Do you wake up exhausted, even after sleeping through the night? Do you rise in the morning with an inexplicable fatigue, a heaviness in your body, as if something had been weighing you down during the hours you were supposed to be resting? Do your plans fall apart for no apparent reason? Does your money vanish before you even have time to count it, before you've even made a bad financial decision? Does your memory grow hazy, your thoughts muddled, and your ambition evaporate like smoke in the sun, leaving you unsure if it is you or something else at play? If you answered yes to any of these questions, I want you to listen to me now, not in 5 minutes, but right now, because what I am about to reveal will change the way you view your nights and, perhaps, how you understand your entire life. My name is Sabotage. I live in Bafoussam, Cameroon, and for 12 years of my life, between the ages of 24 and 36, I was the one doing exactly what you have just experienced. With my own hands and my own rituals, I used to rob people while they slept, people perhaps just like you, people who didn't know, who had done nothing wrong, people who fell asleep peacefully, thinking the night was a time of refuge, only to wake up missing something without ever understanding why or being able to name what had been taken from them. Today, I am free, liberated by Jesus Christ after a long and difficult process that I will tell you about, and it is precisely this freedom that compels me to speak. I should not still be alive, but God willed that I stand here before you to reveal what no one else will tell you, 3 specific things, 3 invisible mechanisms, that we use to enter your sleep and take what belongs to you, mechanisms I know down to the finest detail, because I practiced them myself for over a decade. Before we begin, I need to tell you something important. I'm going to reveal 3 techniques in this video, but I've saved the third one, the most devastating, the most insidious, the one that even some seasoned market sorcerers couldn't always master with such precision, for the very end. If you leave before then, you won't grasp the full scope of what can happen in your life, and you won't see the whole picture. So, please stay until the end. What you're about to hear will change the way you view your nights, and perhaps even your days. And if this video is already striking a chord in your heart, if something inside tells you that you need to hear this, do just one thing for me right now. Hit the like button. That simple gesture helps me reach others who need to hear this truth. Let me tell you how I got here. I was 24 years old. I was a merchant in the Aqua district of Douala. I had built something small but solid, a business selling phones and electronic accessories. It took 3 years of hard work, sacrifice, sleepless nights, and careful saving. I had learned the trade from scratch, observing, training, and taking calculated risks. My business wasn't booming spectacularly, but it was stable and honest. I was proud of it. Yet, in the span of just 4 months, a man I considered a close friend, someone who knew all my suppliers, my prices, my regular customers, and my trade secrets, took everything. He opened his own shop just 100 meters away, offering the exact same products, the exact same pricing, and the exact same layout, and in a way I couldn't logically explain. All my customers drifted over to him one by one, as if drawn by a magnet, as if there were an invisible force pulling them toward his shop. Some people I had known for 2 years, people I had extended credit to, people I had shared tea with for years, wouldn't even look at me as they walked past my place. I cannot put into words the rage I felt. It was a physical sensation, a burning from within. I had wanted to work honestly in a country that makes everything difficult. I had wanted to build my life with my own hands and mind, and this man had stolen everything from me, without shame, without remorse. He would still greet me in the street. He even had the audacity to smile. One evening, after watching my income collapse for weeks, a friend advised me to go see someone, a man simply known as the Old Man, who operated discreetly in the neighborhood I won't name. I was told he helped shopkeepers, and that people had seen their businesses turn around after consulting him. At first, I refused. I had grown up in a God-fearing family. My mother went to church every Sunday, and my father read the Bible in the evenings. That sort of thing wasn't part of my world, but the pain was stronger than my principles. The betrayal had opened something inside me, A door I should never have walked through. I went to see the old man one Thursday evening, just before nightfall. I just wanted to get my customers back. I just wanted him to do something to revive my business. I told myself it would be a one-time visit, that I wouldn't go back. He looked at me for a long time, without speaking, for a good minute. Then he asked, "Do you want me to give you power, or do you just want a one-off service?" I said a service. He smiled in a way I only understood much later. He said, "With a service, the effects last for a certain time. With power, your life changes forever, but it belongs solely to you." I said no to power. I just wanted to reclaim what was mine. But that night, something happened during the ritual. I won't describe the visual details to you, because they aren't necessary for your understanding. What I'm going to tell you is that the moment the old man spoke certain words over my head, I felt something enter, not my head, but something deeper than my head, a space I wouldn't have been able to name before that night, as if a foreign presence was settling inside me with an ease that told me it had been waiting for this invitation, and instead of being afraid, I felt power, a new, clean, pure power, a power I had never known and which, in that moment of ignorance, seemed to be the solution to all my problems. By the time I got home that night, I had already changed. I didn't know it yet. In the following weeks, my business gradually picked up, then very noticeably, customers were returning. My competitor across the street suddenly seemed less appealing to them. But something else had begun in parallel. I was having very vivid dreams. I saw people in my sleep, people I knew and people I didn't know, and in those dreams, I knew exactly how to touch them, exactly how to take something from them. I saw their lives as if I had access to a map of their inner reality. I went back to see the old man. He told me, "You are no longer a client, you are now initiated," and he taught me. In less than 2 years, I had become one of the most active market sorcerers in Douala. People came to me to obtain what I had learned to do, other traders, civil servants, men and women who wanted something to happen or not happen in someone else's life, and I worked. The night was my workplace, and the sleep of others was my primary resource. This is what I learned during those 12 years. This is what I am going to reveal to you now. The first thing we stole while you slept was your life force. You must understand something fundamental about sleep that is not taught in any school and that Western medicine cannot measure with its instruments. Sleep is not just a time of rest for your physical body, it is also the time when your inner being, what some call the soul or spirit, depending on their vocabulary, performs a kind of retreat into a different space. The protections that surround you during the day, your conscious vigilance, your capacity for active discernment, your will, which maintains barriers, all of that relaxes during sleep, and it was precisely within that relaxation that we operated. It was through that natural opening that we slipped in. Life force is what I would call your spiritual fuel. It is that invisible yet absolutely real thing that allows you to get up in the morning with energy, that gives you the drive to move forward, the clarity to see where you are going, the motivation to take action, the ability to start something and finish it. It isn't neurology, it isn't chemistry, it is something more fundamental, and we had a very precise way of accessing it. The ritual always began at midnight, never before. That time is not arbitrary. In the spiritual realm where we operated, midnight corresponds to a moment of least resistance within the invisible dimension. The guardians, if you want to call them that, are less active. Access is easier. We used a specific blend of oil and ash gathered from particular plants, and the ritual's central object was always something linked to the target, a worn garment, a recent photograph, a personal item, sometimes, for targets we did not know personally, their full name written on a scrap of cloth sufficed. A name is a gateway in itself. This is not superstition, it is something understood through direct experience by those who have traveled in these dimensions. As we chanted over these elements at the stroke of midnight, I could literally feel, in my physical body, something shifting in the air around me, a current, a connection forming between myself and the sleeping person, sometimes miles away, like an invisible channel opening up. What we were draining away was invisible to the naked eye, yet the effects were perfectly visible in the target's life. The person would wake up tired, not merely physically exhausted, as after a restless night, but with a profound, inexplicable fatigue that neither coffee nor extra rest could remedy, as if someone had drained an internal battery during. At night, she could sleep for hours yet wake up exhausted, as if she hadn't slept at all. Because while physical rest did occur and the body recuperated, spiritual restoration was being intercepted. It was siphoned off before it could reach the person. If this affects you, here are the symptoms you might recognize in your own life. You get enough hours of sleep, yet you remain constantly tired. You wake up with a heaviness that may lift during the day but invariably returns the next morning. Your body is present in the morning, but your mind takes hours to truly kick into gear. You experience intense dreams, sometimes involving combat, running without making headway, chaotic situations unlike anything in your real life, or dark, oppressive spaces. These dreams are not merely products of your subconscious, often, they are traces of what actually transpired in the spiritual realm while you slept. This draining process could persist for weeks, months, or even years without intervention. The longer it lasted, the deeper the theft, and the more permanent the effects became on the target's behavior. Eventually, people lost the strength to fight for their own lives. They would abandon projects halfway through, sometimes just as success was within reach, or walk away from opportunities without knowing why. They lost ambitions they had held for years. It wasn't for a lack of talent, intelligence, or skill, nor because life failed to offer openings, but because the inner resource needed to take action was being drained night after night, much like a bank account being emptied of 100 francs every night, leaving the owner unable to understand why they were constantly overdrawn. I remember a man, an entrepreneur from Bafoussam whom I will call Grégoire to protect him, because his real name must not be mentioned here. A client had paid me to block a business rival of his. Grégoire owned a transport company with a fleet of 6 vehicles and a reputation built on 10 years of hard, honest work. Everyone in the industry respected his name, yet, after 6 months of targeted nocturnal work, 6 months of midnight rituals performed using his name and photograph, he no longer had the strength to manage anything. He would arrive at his office in the morning and sit there, unable to figure out where to start. He would stare at his files, unable to bring himself to open them. He would take phone calls and forget half of what was said. His employees watched him with growing concern. Every evening, his wife would ask if everything was all right. A doctor had prescribed antidepressants and ordered brain scans. The test results were all normal, because the problem wasn't in his brain, it lay in his life force, something no medical scanner can detect. His wife wrote to me 2 years ago after seeing one of my early testimonial videos. She told me in 3 simple, direct lines, "He was my husband, the man you describe, that was him, and all those years, we prayed, but we didn't know what we were fighting against." Reading that message shattered me in a way I couldn't have foreseen. I turned off my phone, asked God for forgiveness, and knew I had to keep speaking out, even when remembering was painful. Life force theft is the first technique, and now I want to tell you about the second, one that affects something even more tangible in your daily life. But first, I need to tell you something important, something that took me a long time to understand. After my deliverance, when God set me free, the first thing I felt wasn't joy or euphoria, it was an overwhelming guilt that pinned me down for days. Dozens of faces came flooding back to my memory, names, stories, lives I had damaged, people I would never know, and I asked myself a very specific question: now that I know what I've done, is that enough to set things right? No, knowing isn't enough, understanding what is happening to you is absolutely necessary. That's why I'm here, but the real problem is that this draining leaves its mark. Realizing you've been robbed for years doesn't close the open doors, it doesn't erase the patterns that were installed in your life. The cycles of fatigue persist, as do the repeated abandonments, the chronic inability to finish what you start, and the recurring financial blocks. None of this simply vanishes just because you have intellectually grasped what happened. The evil carved out a void, and that void remains even after understanding is reached. It is like a wound containing a thorn. You can extract the thorn from your flesh. Extracting the thorn represents understanding, but if you fail to treat the remaining wound, the infection persists, it deepens and spreads, and merely knowing the thorn's origin does not halt that progression. After my deliverance, I had to undergo a rigorous process to shut, one by one, the doors that my 12 years of witchcraft had opened in my own life. This was not a mere Sunday prayer, but a systematic 21-day process, identifying every door, sealing every point of access, and breaking every mandate. It is this process that I wanted to share with those in need. It is called Destroying the Mandates of Darkness, 21 days dedicated to closing, door by door, what the enemy has opened in your life and your lineage. It is not for those seeking a quick, superficial prayer, but for those weary of suffering who wish to address the damage in a serious, genuine way. And I must tell you something crucial. The very techniques I once used to steal life force were the same ones employed by other sorcerers to block finances, destroy marriages, cause barrenness, obstruct visas, and derail careers. This is not a one-sided attack targeting only a single aspect of your life. A mandate affects everything. Wherever you attempt to move forward, you encounter resistance, because an open door makes no distinctions. Everything passing through your life must pass through that door. Brothers and sisters from Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Congo, and Senegal write to me every week to share how this process has changed their lives. If you are watching this video on your phone right now, the link is in the description. Just click on it. If you are watching on a TV or computer screen, scan the QR code appearing on the screen now. Simply point your phone at the screen, and you will be taken directly to the page. Now, if you have experienced that inexplicable fatigue upon waking, those dreams of fighting or confusion during the night, or that feeling of exhaustion with no visible medical cause, that morning heaviness that returns every day, I invite you to take part in a powerful action right now. Write in the comments, "In the name of Jesus, I break every mandate that steals from me while I sleep, and I reclaim everything the enemy has taken from me." Do not skip this step. Participating in a public declaration is not merely symbolic, it is an act of real spiritual warfare. When you name the assignment and break it alongside other believers doing the same thing at the same time, you are waging a battle that yields results. And I can tell you from personal experience that when hundreds of believers participate and proclaim the victory of Jesus together, those mandates are broken. So, participate now. Write in the comments, "In the name of Jesus, I break every mandate that steals from me while I sleep, and I reclaim everything the enemy has taken from me." Let us now return to the second technique, because it has an even more specific impact on your daily life. The second thing being stolen while you slept was your resources and financial blessings. I understand that this might sound strange at first. How can money be stolen from someone who is asleep? Let me explain exactly how this works in the spiritual realm. The money visible in your bank account is the result of an invisible reality, your ability to create, to make sound decisions, to seize opportunities at the right moment, to be in the right room with the right people, to come up with ideas that generate value, and to work productively. All of this has a spiritual dimension, that is the dimension where prosperity originates, and it was that source, not the bank account itself, that was being attacked. This ritual differed from the first in both its structure and its timing. It did not take place at midnight. Instead, it occurred at the precise moment the target was falling asleep. During the transition between wakefulness and sleep, that very specific moment of transition, we had methods to estimate this time for each target, and at the moment of that transition, when consciousness let go and the body slipped into sleep, we would execute what the old man called a leap onto the path where blessings flowed, targeting not the person themselves, but the stream of what was destined for them. Here is what this leap actually produced. The person could continue working with the same apparent energy. They might possess intact talent, genuine skills, and a solid professional reputation, yet, something invisible blocked the connection between their work and the expected financial returns. They would constantly spend slightly more than they earned. Opportunities would come their way only to turn sour at the last moment. Sometimes for absurd reasons, serious, seemingly reliable associates would become sources of trouble, signed contracts would fall through without any logical explanation, and the person couldn't understand it. They had done everything right, worked hard, and deserved the outcome, yet the result never materialized. There was something particularly diabolical about this technique. We didn't just block things, we could also redirect the blessings stolen from the target toward the client who had paid us. It wasn't merely a passive blockage, it was an active transfer. Good things that should have gone to one person were spiritually rerouted to another destination. One person grew poorer while the other grew rich on what did not belong to them, and neither party understood the mechanics of what was happening. I remember a merchant in Yaoundé's Mfundi district, let's call her Clarice, a business rival in her sector had contacted and paid me to sabotage her business. Clarice sold high-quality wax prints and fabrics. She worked with remarkable diligence. Her prices were competitive, her merchandise was carefully selected. She shared a genuine bond with her loyal customers, women who had been returning for years, but the moment that bucket was placed there, her business began a slow decline, not all at once, but gradually, almost imperceptibly at first. Regular customers vanished one by one, goods that had been in constant demand for months suddenly stopped selling. She tried changing strategies, she switched suppliers, lowered her prices, and even prayed and fasted. Nothing worked. Every measure she took came a little too late or failed to yield the expected results. Eventually, after 18 months, she closed her shop. She blamed the general economic downturn, she blamed the intensifying competition, she sought logical explanations, for the human mind always craves logic. She never knew that, night after night for 18 months, a bucket was being placed over her blessings, siphoning off the fruits of her labor while she slept. Someone else was growing rich on what was spiritually hers, and she would never know it. She would go to her grave believing it was just bad luck. I had long since stopped thinking about Clarice, but when I stood before God after my deliverance, her face, along with others, came back to me. I realized then that I could not bring about restitution through my own strength. Only God can restore what the thief has stolen. Only God can give back lost years. The symptoms of having one's financial blessings stolen during sleep are very specific and recognizable once you know what to look for. You work hard, you toil, yet the money never stays. It comes in and goes out again with a speed that defies all logic regarding your actual expenses. Opportunities that seemed absolutely certain collapse at the last moment, sometimes at the 11th hour, for reasons you cannot truly explain to anyone else. Sometimes you wake up in the morning gripped by intense financial anxiety, a tightness in your chest regarding your finances. Even though no new event has occurred to justify such a level of anxiety, there is a persistent sense of lack, a feeling that something is always missing, even during periods when your income is objectively adequate, and your dreams often show you emptying markets, failed transactions, or losses you try in vain to prevent. These are traces of what is playing out spiritually around your finances while you sleep. It is not bad luck, it is not your fault, it is not your destiny, it is a specific mechanism, and mechanisms can be broken. Now, I mentioned 3 techniques at the start of this video. We have covered 2, but before I reveal the third, the one I saved for last because it is the hardest to recognize, I must tell you about the gradual effect these techniques had on me. Because there is something even those who practice witchcraft do not always understand at the beginning of their initiation. The sorcerer pays a price. 2. Darkness spares no one, not even those who serve it. Over my 12 years of practice, I had amassed a form of real, tangible power. My business was thriving. I had more money than I needed. I had a reputation in certain circles. I held sway over situations. Yet, something within me was dying with every nocturnal ritual, something very slow and very deep. I became unable to sleep soundly myself. I would wake up at specific times, always the same hours, as if an internal alarm were keeping me in a state of constant, partial wakefulness. Even while I slept, my relationship with my wife was deteriorating. Without my being able to pinpoint why, my children seemed ill at ease, guarded, in my presence. Even during moments when I tried to be attentive and warm with them, there was something about me, an atmosphere that those close to me sensed but couldn't quite name. Then came one particular night. I was performing a ritual on a specific target when I encountered a resistance unlike anything I had ever faced before. Something was blocking me. I pushed, but something repelled my efforts, as if a wall had sprung up between me and the target, and in that night of resistance, something shifted in my room, a luminous presence, vastly different from anything I had ever summoned in my life, swept through the space. I cannot describe it in words that would do justice to what I experienced. What I can tell you is that, in a split second, I saw, truly saw, with absolute clarity, the reality of what I was doing, the suffering of the people I had drained, the reality of the lives I had damaged, and the reality of the depths in which I was mired up to my neck. I found myself on my bedroom floor, weeping without understanding where the tears were coming from, and in that moment, for the first time in years, a name surfaced within me. I spoke it almost involuntarily, Jesus, but that night did not yet mark my complete liberation. It was merely the beginning. I will save the rest for later in my testimony, because now I must reveal a third technique, the one I promised to share. The third thing we stole while you slept was your ability to think and make decisions. It is the most insidious of the three and the hardest to spot in your own life, because it tricks you into believing that what is happening originates entirely from within you. It does not attack your body, it does not directly attack your finances, it attacks your free will from the inside, it makes you a stranger to yourself. Here is exactly how it worked. During sleep, the human mind is not idle, it continues to process information, organize data, and unconsciously prepare for the hours and days ahead. The decisions you make in the early morning and the intuitions that guide you throughout the day are often heavily influenced by the work your mind did while you slept. This natural process is absolutely real. We had learned how to intercept and alter it. In our internal jargon, we called the technique planting a seed in the mind of a sleeping person. It wasn't mind control like in the movies, it wasn't about taking over someone's thoughts, it was far more subtle, and therefore much harder to detect. We would implant a targeted confusion, a fog surrounding a specific topic, an artificial hesitation regarding a particular decision, or a doubt that hadn't existed before. If a person were to make a major decision the following morning, signing a contract, accepting a marriage proposal, starting a project, choosing a significant life path, or taking a calculated risk that could have transformed their situation, we could intervene during the night to create an internal resistance to that decision, not a logical resistance, but an emotional, irrational one that defied all argument. The person would wake up with fresh doubts, irrational fears, and a sudden inability to see clearly something that had seemed obvious the night before. They might even have spoken enthusiastically about the project to their spouse before falling asleep, yet by morning, something had changed, something they couldn't explain, and the cruelest part was that they believed it was their instinct. They believed something deep inside was telling them not to move forward. They valued that hesitation, they gave it credence, they shared it with loved ones who might have told them to trust their feelings, but it wasn't their instinct, it wasn't God holding them back. It was the work we had done while they slept. I remember Patrice vividly. He had an extraordinary career opportunity. A business partner in Gabon was offering him a deal that could have quintupled his income in 2 years. Patrice had analyzed the proposal for weeks. He had consulted trusted advisors, he had prayed, everything pointed to yes, he was ready to sign, but during the 3 nights leading up to the signing, someone who wanted the partnership for himself paid me to intervene. 3 nights of planting targeted doubts in Patrice's mind, 3 nights spent cultivating a fog around his decision. On the morning of the signing, Patrice woke up with a sudden wave of doubt he couldn't rationalize. Absurd questions swirled in his head. What if the partner wasn't reliable? What if the market changed? What if the timing wasn't right? He asked the Gabonese partner for more time. That partner, under pressure from his own constraints, found someone else within 48 hours. The opportunity was lost. Patrice never knew why he had hesitated that morning. He had been living with that regret for years when he wrote to me. He believed he had lacked courage. He blamed himself for a decision he had never actually made freely. The symptoms of this third technique are easily recognizable once you know them. Chronic indecision regarding important matters, even when you had been resolved the day before. Projects launched enthusiastically in the evening only to be abandoned without clear reason the next morning, as if the night had erased your conviction. A growing inability to trust your own judgment on issues that matter, and doubts that arise precisely when you are about to act, never during moments of inaction. And often, there is an inner voice that seems to resemble your own, speaking with your own internal accent, yet consistently says the opposite of what you ought to do to move forward. This last technique is the one that destroys destinies in the long run, not through major, visible catastrophes or spectacular dramas, but through a silent accumulation of acts of giving up. Each act of surrender paves the way for the next. Each decision left untaken makes the subsequent abdication easier, and after 5, 10, or 15 years, the person looks back and wonders where their life has gone. They cannot pinpoint a specific moment when everything shifted. They simply see that something has evaporated, that the life they had hoped for never materialized. There was no clear catastrophe, no visible enemy, just a succession of hesitations and surrenders that, combined, resulted in an incomplete life. What I want to reveal to you now is something I only understood after my liberation. When I began to look back with clear eyes, I realized that these 3 techniques, the theft of vital energy, the theft of financial blessings, and the sowing of confusion in decision-making, do not operate within a single generation alone. Their effects span generations when they persist long enough. Here is what I mean. When a person is subjected to these nocturnal attacks for years, something shifts in how they inhabit the world, how they view themselves, and how they perceive what is possible for them. They develop unconscious defensive behaviors. They become less ambitious, not by choice, but because ambition that is repeatedly thwarted eventually comes to seem dangerous to their mind. They pass on a certain resignation to their children, a wariness of success, an invisible ceiling beyond which one must not rise, not intentionally, and not because she is a bad parent, but because what we receive over the years eventually becomes what we project. We pass on what we have become. I have seen entire families have their trajectories altered because of the work we did with just one member. The father had been our target, yet his children were growing up in the atmosphere of a man who had lost his strength, someone who no longer truly believed, who gave up at the last moment, and they absorbed this atmosphere as a life lesson. They grew up with their own limitations, ones they couldn't attribute to a specific cause and that their parents couldn't explain to them either. It wasn't destiny, it wasn't the inevitable fate of a family or a group. These are open doors that remain open, allowing generations of attacks to pass through until they are shut. I want to tell you about a specific case so you understand what I mean by a generational effect. A man I'll call Simon had been our target for 4 years, 4 years of nightly theft of his life force, 4 years of assaults on his finances. Simon was a taxi driver, hard-working, honest, a man who had tried several times to move on to something bigger, like a small fleet or a side business, only to fail at the last moment. He didn't understand why. He prayed, he worked, he tried again, but the results never came. What I saw was how his 2 eldest sons, having grown up watching him struggle and fail, had absorbed his fear of failure as an absolute truth about their family. One of them wrote to me a year ago. He told me that projects in his family never succeeded, that it was like a family curse, and he asked if it was real. It was real, but it wasn't an automatic hereditary curse. It was an open door in his father's life that had never been closed, and the atmosphere it created had shaped the children. A door can be closed, a generation can be set free. That is what I carried, that is what I had helped instill in dozens of families. My liberation began on that night I told you about, with that luminous presence and my fall to the ground, but it was not instantaneous. Leaving market witchcraft after 12 years of involvement is not a decision made overnight, nor does it bring deliverance overnight. There are bonds, formal pacts sealed in the spiritual realm, and commitments made to entities that mere human will cannot simply dismiss. The months following that night were the hardest of my life, harder than anything during my 12 years of witchcraft, because I was trying to break free, yet something was resisting. There were nightly battles of an intensity I will not describe here, manifestations that terrified my wife, moments when I did not know if I would hold on, and then, there was an encounter, a man of God in a church in Bafusam, a stranger who looked at me during the service and, afterward, told me things he could not possibly have known by human means. He knew where I came from, he was unafraid, and he walked with me through the weeks that followed. It was a long, methodical process, door by door, commitment by commitment, naming and renouncing them one by one. Then, one morning after weeks of this work, I woke up and realized I was truly awake, rested, with a sense of inner cleanliness, free of the heaviness I had carried for so long that I had come to believe it was part of my nature. It was not part of my nature, it was the weight of what I had summoned over those 12 years. Today, I wake up every morning and thank God for that morning, because I know what a morning ought to cost. I know what sleep should be like when it isn't stolen, and I know that for many people watching this video, their mornings don't look like that yet, but they can, if you've listened to this video this far. If pieces of your personal story have started to fall into place in a new way as you listened to me speak, if you recognized your exhaustion, your financial roadblocks, the decisions you abandoned, or your unfulfilled life in what I've just described, it is no coincidence that you are watching this video today. There are no accidents in you watching this tonight. What you heard today gives you understanding. But understanding calls for action, and that action is real, serious, and within your reach. Don't let the demon sleep better than you do. If this video struck a chord with you, subscribe to this channel, because what I share here isn't taught in theological seminars, it isn't found in biblical interpretation textbooks. This is knowledge from the inside, knowledge from someone who was on the other side, and it can save lives, marriages, and entire generations. I am a sympathy. For 12 years, I was the enemy of your sleep. Today, I am your witness. God saved me so that I could speak, and I will keep speaking as long as He gives me a voice. The link to destroy the mandates of darkness is in the description, and if you are watching on a large screen right now, the QR code is visible on the screen. Scan it. Your freedom is worth that simple act.